All right. How's everybody doing?
We're ready.
You ready? For Mashiach, yeah, definitely. Beyond ready. Okay. Wow, I just want to get a feeling for the sound here. You hear me in the back, right? Yeah? Yeah? Okay. You hear me at the salad bar? When there's salad, you hear nothing. Jews and food. Okay. The power of even a salad bar. Can you imagine if that was what do they call it, the Viennese table? Is that what it's called? Yeah? Okay. All right. So back in the 1980s, before the fall of communism in the Soviet Union, or the former Soviet Union, there was a refusenik, a Jew who had been trying to get out for many years, and finally he was given his visa, and he moved to America. And as a new immigrant, he was welcomed to his new community here in the United States, and he went to shul. And they asked him, they wanted to know what it's really like. You know, what is it really like in the Soviet Union? So they asked him, listen, you're coming from there right now. You were just there. You've been there. How is it really there? I mean, are you allowed to travel wherever you want to travel? He says, I can't complain. He says, they say, are you able to practice the profession in which you were trained? He says, I can't complain. They say, are you able to criticize the government? He says, I can't complain. You're able to practice your religion? I can't complain. So what'd you come here for? He says, here I can complain. You saw that one coming. Okay. So yes, Baruch Hashem, we live in a free country. A free country means here we can complain. We can be as discontent as we wish. Okay. So I believe the topic tonight, I didn't choose the title, but when I saw it, it resonated with me, is that freedom is a state of mind. And I think before we talk about how it's a state of mind, we have to talk about how to define freedom. Freedom doesn't just mean that you can do whatever you want and nobody can stop you. Right? We live in a free country. In America, you can complain, you do whatever you want. As long as where I swing my fist doesn't hit your face, I can do whatever I want, right? Okay. And we tend to think of that as freedom. But from a Jewish perspective, freedom, or cherus, is a different thing entirely. There's a famous question of the Maharal about how Jewish people can celebrate Pesach through the generations when we were redeemed from Egypt, but then subsequently we were enslaved and persecuted and oppressed by other cruel masters, by other countries. In each generation, there were those who sought to wipe us out. So how can Jewish people sit at the Seder table and celebrate our freedom? Fine, that happened once, but as they say, what have you done for me lately? Look around now. There were Jews in all types of situations who were celebrating Pesach, and they didn't have the liberty to express themselves the way that we do. So the Maharal explains that the Exodus, what occurred wasn't simply a socio-political redemption. of one nation from amidst another nation. Actually, what happened is something much greater than that. It was an existential redemption, meaning there was something that existentially changed in the Jewish person that can never be changed back. We were not just brought into a state of freedom, but we were made into free people, b'nei chorin. We are people who are intrinsically free. And so even if there are those in our environment who may prevent us from acting as we wish, that doesn't change the underlying truth that we remain free. Okay, that's a beautiful idea. It's inspiring. But what does it mean? I mean, in practical terms, okay, fine, so I'm free. And nothing that anybody does to me could ever change that. What does it mean? It's kind of hard to stand here in Crown Heights on the second, third day of Shiva of Rebbetzin Kazin, which half of you are probably great-grandchildren of, just statistically speaking, in any given room of Lubavitchers. And not to think about when they took away her husband, and she was left with small children at home, and she came home and she danced with them. And she said, they can take away your tati, they can take away our home, they can take away everything, but they can't take away our spirit. So if you really want to know what this talk is, that's it. That's in a nutshell. The woman for whom hundreds of great-grandchildren are sitting Shiva right now, or they're not, Baruch Hashem, not sitting Shiva, but they're, because grandchildren don't sit, but for whom their parents are sitting Shiva, that moment right there, in a nutshell, that sums it all up. That's the chokhmah. You want the bina? Okay, fine. That's what I get paid for. I'll stand up here and I'll elaborate, I'll explain it. But in a nutshell, you want to know what it is? They can take everything from us, but they cannot take our spirit. They can do whatever they want to us. Freedom doesn't mean that I can stop you. Baruch Hashem, we live in a country like this where we do have rights. And if somebody tries to impinge on them, there is protection under the law. But real freedom, existential freedom, means even when they take everything else away, they still cannot take away our spirit. That means they cannot rob us of who we are. They cannot change us. We remain who we are. So I'll tell you another story. Another story of Russia. Remember Futafas. By the way, I'm just wondering, for my own edification, does everybody get my WhatsApp videos? Everybody? Okay, good. Okay, so I can tell this story. Okay, all right. Baruch Hashem. All right. So, Reb Mendel Futafas, when he was in the work camp, as you know, most of the people there were pretty rough customers. They were criminals. That's why they were in prison. Although there were others as well, like, for instance, Reb Mendel, who was a political prisoner. And there were others as well, like there were intellectuals, there were academics. The communists were very suspicious of intellectuals, people who know how to think. That's very dangerous. In fact, they tell a joke. They say, why do the KGB officers always work in groups of 3? Because you need one who knows how to write, you need one who knows how to read, and you need a third one to keep his eye on the 2 intellectuals. So they were always suspicious of people who could think for themselves. And this professor, like many professors during the the times of communism, he was also sent to this same work camp. So Reb Mendel said that one day this professor takes him aside and he says, I want to ask you something. I noticed that many of the men in this camp here are young men. They're basically healthy men. As far as I can see, they haven't contracted any disease. They aren't malnourished to the point of starvation. They weren't victims of a particular act of violence. But one morning, so it's not like they starved to death. They didn't succumb to a fatal disease. It wasn't like they were beaten till they died. But just one morning, I'll see it, and it happens frequently, that they will not have the will to get up off the cot. When there's roll call in the morning, we have to line up for work, and they won't get up off the cot. And then when we come back from the day of slave labor, we'll find them dead in their beds. And just like that, they just drop like flies, one after the other. And I'm trying to understand it. I'm devising a theory. And I think part of it has to do with the fact I've been watching you, the professor says to Reb Mendel, and I notice you're totally the opposite. That you seem to be full of life. And in fact, you enliven everybody else. You're full of good cheer. So what's the secret? And Reb Mendel told this professor, he says, let me tell you something. These guys here that you're watching, they're Cossacks. Do you know what that means? Do you know what kind of characters they are? These are, for them, life is three things. A horse, a rifle, and a bottle of vodka. That's it. That's life. Now, when they're sent to this work camp, they don't have access to those three things. That was removed from that, was taken away. But that's life. So, life was taken away. And it's only a matter of time. It's an inevitability that the body is going to get the memo from the brain that you're dead already. So don't bother getting up. And that's what you see happen one after the other. By coming here, their lives were taken from them. Life as they define it, as they value it. And it's only a matter of time before the body catches up with that reality. Boom, and they're dead. He says, me, what did they take from me? What did they take from me already? Now, slave labor. The man didn't see his wife and children for 14 years. But he says, what did they take from me already? How's my life so vastly different here than it is back at home? You know, back at home, you're working, and you see the sun is setting, and you got to daven mincha. And so, you go to shul, you daven mincha, fine, no problem. Over here, you're working. They were out in the forest chopping wood in sub-zero temperatures. He says, you're working, and you see the sun is setting, so you got to daven mincha. Now, there's no shul to go to. You can't go to shul. And in fact, you can't even stop and daven, or they'll shoot you on the spot. But as I'm working, silently, I daven in my mind. And in fact, I think to myself, wow. You know, in the shul where I daven back home, plenty of people daven. Plenty of people have davened. But here in this spot, here, where I stand right now, and I daven, and I say the praises of Hashem, in all the thousands of years that this spot has existed since creation, I bet you no one ever stood and davened on this spot. So you see, life's not that different back home. I tried to serve Hashem the best I could. Over here, I try to serve Hashem the best I can. So freedom doesn't mean that nobody's going to impinge upon your rights. Nobody's going to put you in jail. No one's going to torture you. No one's going to break down the door. Because you know what? Jews throughout the ages have lived through all of that. Freedom means even when they do those things, They cannot change who we are. The only danger is if we do it to ourselves. They can't do it to us. They don't have that power. No person, no circumstance, no power in this world. The scary thing is we can do it to ourselves. We can convince ourselves that we're not free. And then, for all intents and purposes, we aren't. You know about the guy who goes to the psychiatrist. By the way, everyone knows I'm about to tell a joke, right? Smart crowd, okay. When's the last time a speaker got up and said, a guy went to the psychiatrist and it wasn't the setup for a joke? Okay. No, because I told that really serious story about Reb Mendel. Now I got to lighten it up a little bit. Okay, I'm just telling you what I'm doing. I don't want to be manipulative. I want you to be very clear what's happening. Okay, so a guy goes to the psychiatrist and he says, my brother is stark raving mad. He thinks he's a chicken. Psychiatrist says, so turn him in. He says, I would, but I need the eggs. By the way, I'm going to share another secret with you. You see the sip of water? That's also very deliberate. You don't know about the secret of this? The sip of what? But yeah. By the way, ask me, what's the most important part of telling a joke? Okay, you're going to say to me, what's the most important part of telling a joke? Okay, say it to me. You did it even better than me. Okay. By the way, knock, knock.
Who's there?
Interrupting cow. Moo. None of you have 5-year-olds? Okay. Or maybe that joke is so old that the 5-year-olds don't know it anymore. But tonight, or by tomorrow morning, I bet you a lot of 5-year-olds will know that joke. Use it in my name, not in my name, whatever will be the most effective. Yeah, the sip of the water, that's the timing, that's the pause, yeah. Hashem gave Moshe Rabbeinu a little space between each parsha, but I give a space after the punchline of a joke. Okay, because if they don't laugh at first, then eventually they start feeling awkward, and they'll just laugh so that they don't have to squirm anymore. And then breaks the awkward tension, and then you lose your crowd. Okay, anyways, we're having fun? Yeah. Okay, all right, fantastic. I'm having fun. This is the most fun that I have, standing up here. If only I could get an audience 24 hours a day, then... Okay. The essential freedom of the Jewish person, they cannot take it from us. No one, no thing, no force, no situation. But unfortunately, we can voluntarily do it to ourselves. We can trap ourselves in a mental prison of our own making. And as the Baal Shem Tov said, and I'm sure you're all familiar with this aphorism, B'mokim shel machshavtei shel ish, in the place where a person's thoughts are, sham hu nimtza, there he himself is found. What does that mean? In the place where you put your thoughts, there you are found. You ever sat across from somebody who's physically there, but not present? Yeah? Somebody held up the smartphone. Yes. I'm listening right here. I'm right here. But you're not here. Where are you? B'mokim shel machshavtei shel ish. Such a powerful thing. It's such a powerful thing for the good and not good, what we can do with our minds. Mendel is in a work camp, and he sees it as a place where you get to daven where no one ever davened before. Other people are in a free country where no one can stop you from anything, and they're absolutely miserable. Such a powerful machine that we were given. I'm talking about this. Such a powerful machine. And it's so powerful that it can actually take us out of reality and replace real reality with an alternate reality that feels so real that our bodies don't even know the difference. Our bodies don't even know the difference. You ever have that adrenaline rush? You know, your throat is tight and your palms are sweating and your heart is racing. That's an adrenaline rush. Your body is giving you a fight or flight signal. And it's not a response to any stimuli in your immediate environment. In other words, the Eibishter created us with a survival mechanism called fight or flight, the adrenaline rush. So if you're walking through the forest and a bear jumps out, oh no, there's a bear, and then you get the adrenaline rush, and then you can run real fast. You know about the two guys in the forest? By the way, set up for a joke. And one of them, they see the bear jump out, so one of them bends over, starts tying his shoes. And the other guy says, you can't outrun a bear. He says, I don't have to outrun the bear, I only have to outrun you. You heard, was it too morbid, or you all heard it before? Well, hold on a second. I don't have to outrun the bear, I only have to outrun you. See? Okay. And then you act nonchalant about it. Okay. So the fight or flight response, that's a God-given survival impulse. It's very useful. Very useful. When it's a reaction to stimuli, when it's a reaction to stuff that's actually happening. Not so much when it's the response to a meditation. I've literally meditated myself into an anxiety that my body feels is just as real as if there were a real bear jumping out and chasing me. You ever driving down the highway and maybe you're stopped in traffic and your mind starts wandering and you don't even know how you got, it's a stream of consciousness thinking. You're not even sure how you got started on this subject, but you start thinking about your life and that turn that your life took, and then start thinking about that person who ruined your whole life. And you start thinking about, from that day, I rue the day, And you start, and the throat is tight, and the palms are sweating, the heart is racing, adrenaline rush, right? And the thing is, the person who you're reacting to is not in the car with you. Maybe they're not even in the same state. But your body is ready to go. Fight or flight. The problem is there's nowhere to run to, and there's no one else to fight beside yourself. Because it's not a reaction to stimuli. It's a reaction to a meditation called a resentment. A resentment, the English word for resentment, comes from the Latin root sentir. Sentir means to feel, like sentiment. So a re-sentiment, a resentment is a re-sentiment, a re-feeling. It's not happening now, but you're feeling it again now. Sometimes we call that visiting the museum. There's this museum. I'm the curator of my museum. It doesn't exist in any physical place, but it's very accessible. I can visit it wherever I travel in the world. I can directly access, and it's open 24 hours a day. I have lifetime membership. I can walk in for free anytime I want. It is the museum of my suffering. And it has exhibits. I'm the curator, and I'm a really good curator. I have exhibits there about all the people who ruined my life and all the different ways that they ruined it. And I'm telling you, this is such a powerful experience. Anyone who goes to this museum, they leave just absolutely shaken to the core. Absolutely. I mean, I'm the only one who's ever visited, but every time I leave, I'm shaken to the core. And there's not even a gift shop, really. Can't even buy a t-shirt. I went to the museum of my personal suffering, and nothing to show for it, but a lot of pain. But I guess I should be more accurate. It's actually not pain. It's not pain because you think about it. Pain, well, the Rebbe used to say, "As it tut weh, schreit man." Right? If it hurts, you say "ow," and that doesn't just mean physical pain. It could be emotional pain. Emotional pain is real, right? Somebody calls you a word, calls you a name. That could cut like a knife. It could sting like a slap. It doesn't have to be physically that they laid hands upon you. Emotional pain is real pain. And when you're in pain, you say, ow. When it hurts, you say, ow. But then there's something else entirely called suffering. They say that pain is unavoidable. Suffering is optional. Although perhaps more accurately, you might say pain is unavoidable. Suffering is self-imposed. By definition, all suffering is self-imposed. What's the difference between pain and suffering? So like I was talking about before, that adrenaline reaction, which is a reaction to the bear. It's a stimulus response. Something happened in your environment and your body reacts to it. That's pain. The minute you go up here and you start meditating on what just happened and coming up with stories, usually victim scripts, tragedies where you are the tragic hero, that's the suffering. So I'll illustrate. That's a little bit too cerebral. I'll illustrate it for you. You get up at 3 a.m. and you're walking down the hallway upstairs, where the carpeted hallway. I don't know if your hallway on the second floor is carpeted, but for the purposes of this thought experiment, yeah, it has to be carpeted. And the thick carpet. You're going to see why in a second. Okay, so you're walking 3 a.m, half asleep, and you're walking sort of clumsily down the hallway with the thick carpet, and your kids had been playing Lego earlier in the day. You know where this is heading? Oh my gosh, trigger warning. Okay, sorry. All right, just warning you. This is coming. Yeah, it is. Yeah, and you take a step. And the minute it happens, the millisecond, I just stepped on a Lego. And you wait for, at that point in time, everything slows down so much that you can actually wait for the neurological response, right? You're just waiting, it's coming. And then, the electrical impulses shoot up your foot to your brain and then back down to your foot. And all of a sudden, ow! Okay. But I want to tell you something. There's nothing neurotic about that ow. It's just a stimulus response. Stepping on a Lego hurts. You step on a Lego, you say, ow. That's pain. That's pain, and that's fine. Pain is fine. A second after the pain, you bury your head in your hands and you say, why does stuff like this always happen to me? That's the suffering. Now the interesting thing is the pain lasts as long as it lasts. Stepping on a Lego, maybe a minute, 2 minutes. The suffering lasts as long as you milk it for. Yes, you can revive the suffering at any time you choose. You can go back and meditate upon it. You can be driving down the road a week from now and thinking about, and I bought those Legos with my own hard-earned money. The irony, and I slave, and there's no appreciation, and then they don't clean up, and I told them to clean up. It's 15 years later, the kid who left out the Legos is going to his chuppah. You're walking to the chuppah, you're thinking, I'm walking my son to his chuppah. I'm so proud, he grew up. He's going to get married, he's going to raise children. And one day they'll leave out their Legos. And he'll know the pain. Okay. So we have a very, very powerful machine that the Eibishter has given us access to at all times. This machine can absolutely preoccupy us. It can take us on a trip, a journey. It can transform the moment. It can put us in a reality that is of our entirely own making and remove us from the reality that the Eibishter himself is creating. And none of it is objectively real, but it feels so incredibly real. That's the power. That's the power of the mind. But that same exact power, you can flip it. You can flip that power. You can use it for good. And that was the story, basically. That's what Reb Mendel was telling the professor at the Gulag, at the work camp. He was talking about reframing. He didn't call it that. You know, it's hard to know, and it's probably impossible to verify a thing like this. But the timing, as far as when Reb Mendel was in Siberia, it is possible. I don't know what type of access they had behind the Iron Curtain to publications that were coming out, but it is possible that professor had become aware of Viktor Frankl, of logotherapy, which was published right around those. Again, it's impossible to ever know, but it's uncannily similar. Frankl had that theory. A lot of people think he came up with logotherapy based on his experiences in Auschwitz. It's actually inaccurate. He came up with the theory before Auschwitz. In fact, he describes in Man's Search for Meaning how when they brought him to Auschwitz and they confiscated his belongings, all he brought with him, his most precious possession, was his manuscript, and they confiscated his manuscript from him. So he had the book written before, and they burned it. And he said, I will get out of here and I'll rewrite it. And what ended up happening is everything that he theorized about the human being ended up being tested and confirmed for him before his very eyes. He saw that very thing. Of course, he saw people being murdered. But you don't need a theory to explain why somebody who's murdered in cold blood dies. What you need to explain is how come somebody who isn't directly murdered, who's indirectly murdered, how can that person die? And he theorized, and he watched before his eyes, that somehow those who believed they had something to live for managed to live. And those who were sure that there was nothing to live for, they succumbed. And he quotes Nietzsche. Interestingly enough. Don't worry, this is the only Nietzsche quote of the evening. Nobody even, that's just funny, that's just a joke, don't worry. Okay, what? No?
I like Nietzsche.
You like Nietzsche? Oh, there's going to be a lot of Nietzsche quotes this evening. Okay, all right. You like philosophers? Yeah, okay, I have a philosopher joke for you. Descartes was at a restaurant, and they asked him, would you like dessert? And he said, I think not. And he disappeared. Come on, I told the joke only for you. You got to laugh. Nobody else got it. Thank you. Okay. He said, I think, therefore I am. Right? So they asked him if he wants, I think not. Okay. At any rate. Frankl quotes Nietzsche and says, a man can endure any how if he has a why. A man can endure any how if he has a why. In other words, a reason. What's it all about? Why is this necessary? Why is this happening? And why is it happening to me? Without answers to those questions, pain becomes unbearable suffering. But conversely, with answers to those questions, even intense pain can be carried not only with an absence of suffering, but with great joy. One can endure great pain, that's unavoidable. When there's pain, physical, emotional, but simultaneously experience great joy. Now you're going to say to me, how can a person be joyous while they're in pain? Aren't those two opposites? Aren't they antonyms? And what I want to tell you is that in the greater world around us, in society around us, they are, because they misunderstand what joy is, and they misunderstand what pain is. And so the two are incompatible. But if you understand that a Jewish person is essentially free, or like the Frierdiker Rebbe said when he was sent into exile, that the Jewish people's bodies were sent into Gullus, but never their neshamas. You can do whatever you want to our bodies, but you can't touch our essence. That means you can't change who I am. You cannot rob me of my identity. What happens to me doesn't define me. I can't control what happens to me, but I can always cling to who I am. Once we understand that, you can be in pain and be joyous at the exact same time. And I'll explain it very simply. Pain and pleasure are stimulus responses. Remember we were talking about before stepping on the Lego? Right? Stepping on the Lego triggers pain. Now you tell me, is there any choice involved in whether or not stepping on the Lego feels painful? No, there's no choice involved. Conversely, you put a piece of fudge on your tongue. Is there any choice involved? I mean, one, it's already on your tongue. The choice was whether or not to put it on your tongue. You know, there was once a chassid of the Mittler Rebbe. The doctor told him he has to stop drinking. And so he went to the Mittler Rebbe, and the Mittler Rebbe says, you have to listen to the doctor. The guy started getting the shakes. I mean, he was a real alcoholic. And he told the other chassidim, and the chassidim said, so drink. He said, I can't. The Rebbe told me to listen to the doctor. You know, if it would be just the doctor maybe, but the Rebbe said. So they said, fine. It won't be your choice. We're going to have two guys hold you down, and one guy stand over you and pour the bottle down your throat. He said, if so, have one guy hold me down and two pour bottles down my throat. If you put a piece of fudge on your tongue, is there any choice involved in whether or not that triggers a pleasurable sensation? No choice at all. Okay. Sensations are automatic. Sensations are of the body. You don't need a mind, you don't need a brain, you don't need to be able to think in order to experience sensations. In contrast, feelings all require a mind. Feelings require a mind. What chapter of Tanya is that, by the way? Where are we told that emotions are the children of intellect? Somebody, like, yeah. I know sometimes we say, I feel hungry, or I feel tired, I feel cold. That's actually a misnomer. Hunger and tiredness and coldness are not feelings. They're sensations. A feeling is, I feel love, I feel awe, Those are feelings, those are emotions, what we call midos. So the difference is, sensations are automatic responses to stimuli. You step on the Lego, you feel pain. You put the fudge on your tongue, you feel pleasure. Those are sensations, and they're not optional. You're just wired that way. There's just this neurological pathway that's set up, and there's no volition, there's no choice in the matter. In contrast, emotions are all intellectually generated. You can't have an emotion if you haven't yet thought. And then the more you think, the more intense the emotion, right? Which is how hisbaininus works, right? Hisbaininus is from the word bina, which is also related to the word baineh. So the bina, the elaborative thinking, is an act of binyan, of building, until you take an emotion that might have just been a subtle feeling, and you can amplify it for good or for bad. A positive emotion, a negative emotion. But you can be misbainin on your resentiment, on your resentment, right? And you can turn that little annoyance into a big, life-consuming preoccupation. Or you could do it for the good. You can take something, you write your gratitude list, and you think about something that makes you feel grateful, something that makes you notice that Hashem is involved in your life, and instead of just smiling for a second and moving on, you sit and you meditate on it seriously. You really think about it. You flesh it out with breadth, as is the manner of bina. Bina yesera nitnu la'isha. Why is bina feminine? I mean, this is a predominantly female audience, so I expect you probably know all these titles already. But it's not just that women have more bina. It's that bina itself, as an intellectual faculty, is feminine. Even when men are misbainin, they are being intellectually feminine. In that bina is the womb, is the rechem of the intellect. Chochmah is the initial kernel, like a little packet of DNA that's microscopic. But the womb of thought, where it expands and becomes articulated into a full anatomy, into a full being that's ready to be born, that all happens in bina. And you can be misbainin on pain, you can be misbainin on pleasure. And you can tell yourself a story of victimhood, or you can tell yourself a story of survival. And what you'll end up with all depends on the process, the mental process. So two people can start with the same stimulus and end up with totally different emotional conclusions. Like the Cossack in Reb Mendel's work camp, and lahavdil Reb Mendel himself. Same stimulus, very different emotional conclusions. One died from his emotional conclusion. The emotional conclusion was that devastating that it robbed him of his life. The other was enlivened by it. He was inspired by it. It gave him life. What do we have here? A question for Q&A session. It says this is not a hint to end. Okay, fine. It's good that you wrote that, because generally that is one of the hints. So they bring you a paper, right? This is the joke about the keynote speaker? Why is it called Lama Nikra Shema Keynote? Because a keynote speaker, they give you a key with a note that says, please lock up. Mom, have you never heard this before? Okay, all right. At any rate, so pain is a sensation, and it's involuntary. But it doesn't have to make me sad. Only I can make me sad. Only I can choose to tell myself a story about my pain that will make me feel sad. And I'll tell you the other side of that same coin. Pleasure doesn't make me happy. Just like no amount of pain forces me to be sad, no amount of pleasure is going to really make me happy. I know that's the myth. The myth is that with enough pleasure, eventually we'll be happy. But here's what I want to tell you. There is no amount of pleasure. There's no critical mass. There's no tipping point where finally you will say, I've had enough pleasure that now it equals some semblance of joy. Because they're two totally different things. It's not like, how many pesos do you need to get $1? Okay, so whatever it is, 10, 100, 1,000, who knows the exchange rate? But there's an exchange rate. But if you say, how much pleasure do I need to experience before I will feel joy? There's no exchange rate. You're talking about two totally different things. And unfortunately, we live in such a materialistic and hedonistic culture, and it's hard not to be affected by it. We all are slaves to some extent to this myth that if we'll have enough pleasure, or the right kind, or the right amount, or the right frequency, then finally we'll be happy. And it doesn't work, does it? And in fact, the Alter Rebbe writes about the guilt cycle, right? Call it out when you know which chapter of Tanya this is. The guilt cycle. He says, a person indulges, and then he feels ashamed of himself, and he feels guilty. And then when he's feeling guilty and worthless, that's painful, so he wants to alleviate his pain. So what does he do to alleviate his pain? He looks for some pleasure. And what's easy pleasure? What's quick pleasure when you need quick, easy pleasure, right? So then you do something that's not necessarily in keeping with your standards. And why not? Because I feel like a loser right now already because I'm feeling guilty. And then you go and indulge in something even worse than what you indulged in previously. And that the pleasure distracts you. Pleasure, by the way, is an analgesic. It's a distraction. It's numbing. So during the moment of the pleasure, it doesn't cause joy, but it causes distraction. Like, I don't know if you guys, I'm feeling old, but we used to have a guy, they used to call him Zalman de Shikr. And Reb Zalman, but he used to say, when we were Bacham, I remember in 770, he said, I drank to drown my problems until I found that the problems float. He kept drinking, but he had good wisdom. And he used to... Anyways, but pleasure, whatever it is, it's all just self-stimulation to cover up whatever stimulus you would otherwise be feeling. So it does work temporarily to numb you, to get your mind off of whatever is eating you. But it's not joy, and not one iota of joy, and no amount of it. A world of pleasure will never accumulate to amount even one speck of joy. That's what the world believes, and they're running after pleasure all the time. And I'll tell you something even more. Not only does pleasure not amount to joy, but you can be in the midst of experiencing pleasure, and at the very moment of the sensation of pleasure, even powerful pleasure, you can be emotionally very, very sad at the same time. And it's not a contradiction at all. And it really shouldn't even be puzzling, should it? Because they're two totally different things. Now, if you don't know that, it's confusing. Well, why does this feel good if it makes me so sad? And why does it make me so sad if it feels so good? And the answer is it doesn't feel good. It's not a feeling, it's a sensation. Sensations are automatic. You can't control them. So, stepping on a Lego is a painful sensation. You can't control it. Putting fudge in your mouth is a pleasurable sensation. You can't control it. Telling yourself a story about either of those things, interpreting it, judging it, giving it meaning, that's all happening up here. That all happens in the brain. And that's where you have not only some control, you have all of the control. And in fact, not only do you have all of the control, get ready for the news, that's the only place where you do have control. Because we can't stop them from doing whatever they do to us. Thank God we live in a relatively safe and secure time. As far as Jewish history goes, we live in a ridiculously safe and secure time, despite the anti-Semitism in the news. That itself is a proof of how good we have it. Anti-Semitism makes the news. It wasn't too many decades ago where a whole Holocaust didn't make the news. It barely made page 14 of the New York Times until they started finding bodies. Today, one incident, I'm not saying to diminish it. What I'm saying is that we have a relatively safe and secure and privileged life. And I'm not saying it to make anyone guilty. I'm saying it to prove a point. All that stuff isn't making us happy. And it's not that you haven't yet figured out the right combination of it. It's not yet that you haven't yet found exactly the right experience that's going to hit the spot. What you're looking for isn't out there. Whatever's out there, it can't hurt you, but it can't help you either. Bitachon means knowing that no one can help or harm us but Hashem himself. And it's not just something we tell ourselves to be religious. It's something we tell ourselves to be in touch with reality. Because the truth is, nothing outside of us can help us and nothing outside of us can harm us. Pain and pleasure, that's not help, that's not harm. That's just a bunch of stuff that happens. Your life, your mission, your purpose for being here, your why, they can't take it from us, but they can't give it to us either, can they? They can't take it from us and they can't give it to us. You know why? Because we were born with it. Not only we were born with it, we are it. You see, in the world, people start asking, why am I here? What's the purpose? What's the meaning of existence? So they start with an existence and then they go look for an explanation to make existence meaningful. But Judaism is totally different. In Judaism, we start with meaning, and meaning gives birth to existence. You understand the difference? It's not that it's a given that I exist, and now that I exist, I have to figure out what's meaningful about it. It's that there's meaning. Meaning existed first. Hashem's desire. And desire, the why, the will, gave birth to existence. So it's not like our existence has to go find meaning. Our existence is the expression of meaning itself. And that's why you'll never find it outside of yourself, because it's in you and it is you. It's another way of saying, if you want to say it in plain English, that all you've ever really been looking for is yourself. You know the story about Itzik's shul in Krakow, Poland. It still stands. Miraculously, it survived the war. There was a poor, simple Jew named Itzik. He built a shul. How did he afford to build a shul? There's a story how he became rich. He had a dream, a recurring dream his entire life, that he went to Prague, a city where he'd never been. And in front of the palace, he went to the moat, you know, the waterway around the castle. And over the moat, there's a bridge. And under the bridge, there's a riverbank. And there he digs and he finds a treasure. Every night, vividly, he has this dream. And finally he decides, I have to go and follow my dream. So he was an older man already. And he spent whatever money he had saved his whole life on this journey, following a dream. Who knows? But he had to go pursue it. He had to go see. So he gets to Prague. And wouldn't you know it, He sees the palace, and it looks exactly like it's always looked like in his dream. And he looks closer, and there's the moat, like it always looked like in his dream. And there's the bridge, and there's the riverbank. There's the spot. This is the spot he saw every single night of his life for decades. And he's going to dig, but he notices there's a guard. And if he starts digging, the guard is going to arrest him. He doesn't know what to do. He looks at that spot for hours. Can't decide what to do. He goes, finds a hotel. He comes back the next day. He looks at the spot all day. He does this for days on end. Finally, he decides he's going to just, honesty is the best policy. He's going to go to the guard. And he says to the guard, listen, will you let me dig here? I have a dream. Every single night of my life, I had this dream that I dig at this spot and I find a treasure. So can I have your permission? And the guard laughs and he says, Jew, if everyone were as foolish as you are, do you know where I would be right now? I have a dream. I have a recurring dream every single night of my life. I dreamed that I'm in the city of Krakow, Poland, a city where I've never been in my life. And in Krakow itself, I'm in the Jewish quarter where I can assure you I would never even step foot. And in the Jewish quarter, I'm in a particular house, and he describes the house. And in that house, there's an oven. And underneath the oven, there's a loose floorboard. And I lift the loose floorboard and I find a treasure. And I become rich. And you don't see me going off to Krakow, looking in some Jewish home, pushing aside the oven, lifting up loose floorboards, trying to find a treasure, do you? And Yitzhak realizes he's describing his home. Yitzhak tells the guard, you know what? I think I forgot something at home. I'll see you later. Don't worry, it's fine. Don't worry about it. And he goes back. And he pushes aside the oven, he lifts up the loose floorboard, and there it is. There's his treasure, and his treasure has been there all along. It's been there his whole life. You know, where this mashal, I mean, it's a story too, it's a true story, but as a mashal, do you know when Chassidim say this as a mashal? What it represents? Even more specific than that. Chassidim say that this is a mashal for hiskashris. Going to the Rebbe is an act of self-discovery. One of my favorite stories about this, I'll tell you the punchline first, is when Freddie Hager, Olav Shalom Ephraim Hager, when he went to the Rebbe the first time, he was in his 20s, he was a young man, and he came out and he said, the Chassidim didn't prepare me adequately for my yechidus. I thought I was going to meet a great man, and I left realizing that I had met my true self. I just love that. I love that line. I thought I was going to meet a great man, and I left realizing that I had met my true self. Just so powerful. I mean, and that's what it says in Perek Beis of Tanya, isn't it? I mean, Freddie Hager hadn't learned Perek Beis of Tanya at that time, but he nailed it. That's pshat, right? What does it say in Perek Beis of Tanya? It says that every chelik elokah mimal, every Yiddish neshama, the nefesh hashenis b'Yisrael, is from where? Chochmei Allah. The highest phase of the highest level in reality. And then later on in the Perek, what does it say? It talks about low neshamas. Neshamas of Bria and Yitzira and Asiya. So what's pshat? How can Tanya say that all the neshamas are from the highest phase of the highest level? Chochma of Atzilos. And then later on, Tanya says that there are different levels in neshamas. High neshamas, low neshamas. You ever thought about this? And then what does it say in Tanya? But Tanya answers it and explains that this is the meaning of what Chazal say, that you should cleave to Torah scholars. What does it mean to cleave to Torah scholars? It means that in his kashrus, you are reintroduced to yourself. So the neshama of Bria or Yetzira or Asiya, the low neshama, the neshama that took the local train, all the neshamas originated on the same level, but some had to take stops. And by the time they arrived in a guf, there was a lot of wear and tear. And the last place that they had come from, like when you come to immigration, when you fly from a foreign country, they don't ask you which country you're coming, that you went to first. They ask you which country you're coming from. What's the port that you left from? So there are neshamas, they arrived in this world from Asiya, and from Malchus to Asiya, Malchus to Asiya. They're coming from very low, relatively speaking. I mean, they're all spiritual levels, but within spiritual levels, relatively low levels. And by the time they get to the body, you're talking about neshamas that have a low degree of sensitivity. Up in Atzilus, what's Atzilus? What's the Atzilus perspective? In this world, the perspective is that Eilam, Welt, is Bepshitus, and Elokus is Bischadshus. You familiar with these terms? So Eilam is Bepshitus. That means I look at the stender in front of me and I can tap on it and it's real. It's realer than real because I can touch it. Empirically real. Now, that's creation. The idea of a nivra, solid as can be. Okay, but then you ask me, well, what does this nivra have a beire? Is there a creator for the creation? Okay, for that you have to be a philosopher. For that we have to think a little bit deeply. That's the perspective down here in this world. What's in Atzilus? What are the Netzalim, the Malochim, the Neshamas in Atzilus? How do they look at reality? The idea that there's a beire, that there's Elokus, that's realer than real. That's real as can be. You don't need evidence for that. The idea of a nivra? Created beings? That's weird. You have to be a philosopher to imagine such things. This one actually says, now you got to shut up. Okay, fine. No, it's much more polite than that. It says, wrap it up within 30 minutes. Okay, no problem. I can do it. So think about this. Your neshama comes from a place where Elokus is bipshitos. The Eibishter is realer than real. And created reality? That's kind of trippy. That's like this weird kind of concept you got to wrap your mind around. Nivroyim, wow. What do they come up with next? That's where your neshama comes from. And then it came down to a world and everything flipped. And the shtender becomes absolute reality. This is so real. And the idea that there's a dvar avaya that's mechayed and mahava the shtender b'chol rega, oh, for that you have to be a big maskil. So what do you do to return to your original perspective? How do you recapture the view that the Eibishter is reality? That was your original view, Neshamala. That's what you saw. But you lost sight of it because of this container that covers us up, and it floods us with all this alma de shikra, this false world, all this stimuli. So it says, go find someone who even in this world still sees reality the way we all saw it when we were up there. Find a Rebbe. Find a Rebbe who sees Elokus in everything, who sees the Elokus in you, and will get you to see it in yourself. We are who we are. It cannot be changed. But there are a lot of things that can distract us from that truth. so that we lose access to it. When we want to be reminded of who we really are, that we're a neshama, and that we are infinite, and that nothing of this world can affect us or touch us, when we want to be reintroduced to ourselves, we go to the Rebbe. Especially a Rebbe of Chabad, who's going to give us tools of Chabad and teach us how to think. Not tell us what to think, teach us how to think. Use our brains in a healthy way. Use our brains in a way that sets us free rather than enslaves us. But everything we're looking for, what you're looking for is what you're looking with. What you're looking for is what you're looking with. What are you looking with? You're looking with eyes. That's all you were looking for. You were looking for eyes. You were looking to be reintroduced to the truth, including and especially the truth about yourself, the real you. Tell you one last Reb Mendel story. So I told you when he was in prison in the Gulag, these guys were riffraff. They were just common street thugs. And somebody brought in a pack of cards, which was contraband. They were not allowed to have cards. And the guard would come in. He knew they had a pack of cards. And every time they were in the middle of a card game, the guard would come in to catch them. And he never could. And he would turn that barrack upside down, inside out. He'd flip over everything. He tore up the floor. He could not find the pack of cards. And finally, Reb Mendel asked these chavrei, he said, guys, where do you hide the pack of cards? And so quickly, a second before the guard comes in, the cards are out on the table, and then without a trace. So one of them says, why do you think I'm here? He says, I'm a pickpocket. And I'll tell you something about being a good pickpocket. Not only do I know how to take things out of people's pockets without them feeling, I know how to put things in people's pockets without them feeling. You know why the guard never finds the pack of cards? They're in his pocket. He walks in, I put the cards on him, he tears up the barrack, and before he walks out the door, I take the cards back off of him. You don't have to become free, you are free. But you'll only know it if that's what you see. And the ability to see it, the ability to perceive it, is just a choice of not allowing them to dictate reality, but to define reality as we know it. What is life? Life's not something that happens to us. Life is exactly what we make of it, which means the ability to serve. As long as you draw breath, as long as you walk this earth, you have the ability to serve. Reb Mendel was able to daven mincha in a prison camp. And you, whatever's going on in your life right now, without diminishing it, I don't have to diminish it. I don't have to tell you, the pain that you're feeling isn't such big pain. No, to the contrary, I'll tell you, the pain that you're feeling right now is probably incredible pain. You're just used to it. How's that for a pick-me-up? We're in gullus, fellas, or ladies, or whatever's the politically correct term. We're in gullus. Everyone's life is full of pain. A lot of pain. And you're handling it like champs. So I'm not here to tell you, oh, no, you're not feeling pain. We are feeling pain. And you want to know something? as Jews, especially as Chassidim, as Chabad Chassidim, as the Rebbe's Chassidim, we know that in spite of it, we are joyous, we are free, and nothing can change that. Just tell you one last vort. This one takes 30 seconds, mamish. And I saved it till last because it's boring and it would kill the speech if I did it in the middle. So why am I saying it's boring? Because it's the best vort I have, but not every vort that's good is one that's interesting. That's sorry to tell you that. How many steps are there in the Seder? 15. What's 15?
Yud K.
Yud K. Thank you. The Eibishter has 4 letters in his name. Yud is Chochmah, Hey is Bina. Vav is the Midos, the lower Hey is action. The entire Seder is 15 steps corresponding to the letters Yud and Hey, because the entire Aveda of Pesach is Avedas HaMoichin. The whole thing is an intellectual workout. The whole thing is brain work. Flip the switch in your mind and everything changes. Okay, thank you. Am I supposed to do questions? Yes? Or did I expire my time? I'm off the hook, or should I do the questions?
See if somebody has a question.
What? See if they have questions?
Yes.
If they ask a question? Okay, fine. Anyone ask a question? Oh, okay, fine. Yeah.
What does a person who tell themselves immediately after they step on the Lego and immediately after they put the fudge in their mouth?
Immediately after they step on the Lego is one thing, and immediately, what was the other scenario?
Fudge.
Oh, the fudge in their mouth. Oh, okay, fine. Yeah, that was my example. Okay, so the way, right. So the way that you formulated the question is, what is a person who has bitachon? So let me just clarify, not to be pedantic, but I think this is a distinction that's important to be made. Bitachon only pertains to that which has not yet happened. I think a lot of the failure that people have experienced in Bitachon is a misapplication of Bitachon. It's not like, well, you know, it talks about in the Gemara that somebody's walking into the village. They were out of town and they're coming back home and they hear that there's a fire, that a house is on fire. And they say, oh, Hashem, please don't let it be my house. And the Gemara says that's called tefillas shav, called a prayer in vain. Why is it called a prayer in vain? Because it happened already. We don't use bitachon for something that already is a fact. You see, the Eibishter has a big wide hand and anything can change at any moment, in a second. And our bitachon is that in 1 second everything can change in a way that's visibly good. But as for that which already happened or just happened, so you're saying the second after we stepped on the Lego or the second after we put the fudge in our mouth, for that we have to have Emunah. And Emunah means my opinion of how my life is going is pretty irrelevant. My opinion about how my life is going is pretty irrelevant. In other words, I can't stop having an opinion. I have an opinion. My opinion of stepping on a Lego is, I wish that hadn't happened. My opinion of eating the fudge is, I hope that happens again real soon. But my opinion of it doesn't make it good or bad. Emunah is the humility, faith and humility go hand in hand, is the humility to say, I have an opinion and that's okay, but it doesn't really determine whether or not this was a valuable experience. I've had pleasurable experiences that are probably not so valuable. I didn't learn anything from them. They didn't bring me closer to Hashem. I've had painful experiences which were quite the opposite. And in fact, that's what it says in which chapter of Tanya? That the painful stuff is actually the more meaningful stuff because it comes from a higher level. Ashrei Geveshet Yisranu Yudke, which parak? Chav what? Chavav, very good, excellent. Yes. Anything else?
Can you read my
Oh, yeah. Okay. Is it possible to, or how do we, or can we, I guess, instill in our children the idea of happiness whilst experiencing pain and disappointment? Wow. That's a real question. So let me tell you like this. I don't wish it on anybody. I want to tell you something. If being God were an elected position, I believe I could get elected. I do, because I will tell you, the way I would run the world, people would love the way I would promise to run the. I'm not saying I would actually be able to do it, but no one would get a paper cut. This Eibishter that's been running the world the whole time it's existed, he does crazy stuff. I would never do that stuff to you. I promise you. But what I tell you is like this. I don't wish it upon anyone. I hope that no one experiences any pain, ever. But you ask, how can we teach our children happiness while experiencing pain? I'll flip the question on you. How can you really teach your children happiness if you don't have a life that has some pain in it? Someone whose life is, and I wish everyone's life should go like this, but someone whose life is going easy, how do they teach their children that simcha is an avodah? That you can't choose what life dishes out, but you choose every single second of how you decide to feel about it. If everything is lollipops and sunshine, I don't know when the opportunity to teach it is. So the answer to the question is, we teach our children, and by the way, they don't have to know about our personal lives. They don't have to understand the details. That's irrelevant. You don't have to say, by the way, you know what mommy could be really freaking out about right now? I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is, we teach our children how to truly be besimcha. Besimcha, oisius, machshava. We teach them how to truly generate joy through being in control of their minds or exercising the innate control of the mind. We teach that to them by modeling it for them. And we model it when there's plenty of pain and there are plenty of stimuli that we could choose to freak out about. And we don't. And we handle it gracefully. We handle it gracefully. Like the mother whose husband is murdered by the KGB and comes home and dances with the children. Which reminds me that I'm going to probably try to pay a shiva call tonight. Okay, Russian Chassidim stay up late, so you could it's probably till 11:30 you could stop by, right? All right, we're good? One more question, yeah.
So at the very beginning, you mentioned that once we left Mitzrayim, we were Bitachon.
Yes.
So, and that we can never change that.
Yes.
Except, you didn't say exactly, was it just Kabbalah Satorah? I mean, just. But is that what made us Bitachon?
Yetzias Mitzrayim. It wasn't Kabbalah Satorah, it was Yetzias Mitzrayim. It was the fact that we actually never left Egypt. We wanted to leave, we tried to leave, there were failed attempts at leaving, and we never left. We were removed. We didn't take ourselves out. He took us.
So then what's the point of Gullus? Because we can never go back into Gullus if we're always in Torah.
That's precisely the point. That's precisely the point of Gullus.
So it's not actually using the Torah to retrain our vision to be us in the Torah. Because it wasn't the Torah that made us.
It says there's no one free like one who learns Torah, right? Okay. What does that mean? Torah is mental training. Torah is intellectual. What it means is you can have the pack of cards in your pocket and not even know it. Learning Torah is training yourself to know it. So I'll tell you a word, and then we're going to really be finished. Something happened. Gimel Tammuz 2488. not 57, 54, but 24, 88. Yeshua told the sun to stop. Shamish begivin daim. Everyone knows the story? So the Medrash explains, I won't retell the story if we know the story, but the Medrash explains that there was a conversation between Yeshua and the sun. The son told Yeshua that I'm one of the Shnei Ma'ires HaGedolos, and I was created on Yom Revi'i, on the fourth day. You are a Ben Adam, you were created on the sixth day. So I have seniority. By 2 days, I'm older than you, you're not the boss of me, don't tell me what to do, no. So Yeshua says to the son, okay, you got a point. But let me tell you something. I'm not just Stam, a descendant of Adam HaRishon. I have a yichus. I'm from Shevet Ephraim. And Ephraim are B'nai Yosef, of whom it is said that the sun and the moon and the stars bow down to him. Now you listen to me. That's the Medrash. So at first glance, how was Yeshua able to stop the sun? How did he get that power? So the cynical answer is yichus, like everything. Right? He was from the right family, Ben Ephraim, so he was able to stop the sun. But that's not really the answer, because, you see, Yeshua could have lost that argument too, and he would have still been a Ben Ephraim. The fact that he was able to win the argument wasn't because of who his father was, or his father's father, or his father's father's father. The way he was able to win the argument and stop the sun is because of who was his Rebbe, because Moshe Rabbeinu taught him Torah, and he knew what it said in the Torah, and therefore he knew who he was. In Pirkei Avos it says, Chavivin Yisrael shenikraim bonim l'makim. The Jewish people are precious, beloved, because they're called Hashem's children, sons and daughters. Chiba Yeseda, however, it is an even greater expression of affection on Hashem's part. Shenaidas lahem shnikrayim banim. That they know that they are called Hashem's children. What does that mean? It means that in theory, we could have been Hashem's children and not known it. You could be a chelik elikam mimal, mamish, with infinite power, and not even know it the whole time. The Chiba Yeseda is that the Eibishter gave us the Rebbe who told us how precious and powerful we all are. So get to know yourself. Okay, good night.
Thank you everyone for coming. Have a good night.